Good afternoon, everybody. I will call the Environment Committee to order for November 12th, 2024. And I'm excited about today's agenda. So without objection, we can move forward with said agenda. But before diving in, we've got some minutes to approve for October 22nd, 2024.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Carries. Nothing on our consent agenda. And so that takes us to our non-consent agenda, which is one item, 2024-314, 2023 Newport I&I grant. Mr. Gsellmeier, welcome.
Mr. Chair, members of the Environment Committee, thank you for having me. My name is Matt Gsellmeier. I'm the Budget Manager in Environmental Services. I'm here today to present business item 2024-314, which is for a pass-through grant to help fund inflow and infiltration work in Newport. And the proposed action is that the Metropolitan Council approve the awarding of $2.75 million from the 2023 Minnesota Session Laws to the City of Newport and authorize the regional administrator to enter into a grant agreement with the city to reduce the amount of inflow and infiltration into the sanitary sewer disposal system. So the 2023 regular session appropriated $2.75 million to the council to pass through to the City of Newport for capital improvements to reduce the amount of inflow and infiltration in the wastewater collection system. The funds have been received from the state, and they're currently sitting in environmental services operating reserves. And per the legislature, the funds need to be distributed by June 30th, 2026. And if you're seeing this on your tablets, the link will take you to the session laws that are outlined here. The next 4 slides were drafted by the City of Newport to help explain their overall project work. We have Joe Hatch in attendance today, who is the City Administrator for the City of Newport, in case there are any questions. We also have Kyle Colvin in attendance, who's the Manager of Wastewater Planning and Community Programs, and he can help with technical questions related to inflow and infiltration. And so for a bit of background, the City of Newport is located in the southern Washington County along the Mississippi River. They have aging infrastructure that was built in the mid-1960s, and their system is highly susceptible to inflow and infiltration. The city also has stormwater issues that cause runoff to move back toward the bedrock that also contains the sewer pipe and causes water to enter into the sewer system. The city has 3 main street sections they plan to work on in 2025. They'll be addressing their sanitary sewer system, stormwater issues, and some water main issues. These projects total $8.673 million. And the $2.75 million for this grant will be addressing the inflow and infiltration portion, but not the water main projects. Those are other projects that are part of their overall collective projects they're working on. And our engineering team is going to be working closely with Newport to ensure that the $2.75 million that we're discussing today is going specifically to inflow and infiltration related work. This slide shows a breakout of eligible costs that are related to inflow and infiltration. This includes sanitary sewer, pavement restoration, curbing, and storm sewer work. The stormwater and curbing costs are only eligible if they reduce inflow and infiltration into the sanitary sewer system. In addition, overhead engineering or property acquisition costs are included. In addition, no overhead engineering or property acquisition costs can be included as they are not eligible for grant funding. And the next slide gives a little bit more detail on how these costs are related to inflow and infiltration. So this is the final slide from the city, and it explains how this work will reduce I&I. The sanitary sewer work it's pretty straightforward and addresses the sewer infrastructure directly. The second item, which you'll see is pavement restoration, is also eligible because to access the wastewater infrastructure, the pavement needs to be removed. The next 2 items are curbing and storm sewer. These items are eligible because of how the infrastructure is built in Newport. The sewer and stormwater infrastructure is built in a shallow bedrock that collects water routed from the curbing and storm sewer. The water then sits in the bedrock and routes into the current wastewater infrastructure, which is thereby causing inflow and infiltration problems. And you can see that the 4 amounts of this final slide add up to the $2.75 million that we have for this specific grant program. So with that, the proposed action is that the Metropolitan Council approve the awarding of $2.75 million from the 2023 Minnesota Session Laws to the City of Newport and authorize the regional administrator to enter into a grant agreement with the city to reduce the amount of inflow and infiltration to the sanitary sewer disposal system. Thank you.
Questions for Mr. Gsellmeier, please?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Seems pretty easy to say for me. Pretty straightforward. I mean, this is what the session law says, and so we have to do it. But as long as we have you here, is Newport going to use any of the private I&I money that we've been tasked with giving out to do the service laterals as they're doing this work and kind of dig things up once rather than over and over again?
Mr. Chair, members of the committee, we have met with Newport, and they're going to take advantage of all the inflow and infiltration funding, including private I&I, including the municipal I&I grant program, so that they can address this as well as possible. And I think Joe is going to give an even better answer than I can.
Hello,
Mr.
committee
Hatch.
members. Council members, Joe Hatch, City Administrator with the City of Newport. Thank you so much for considering this agreement and this funding. As Representative Hansen likes to call Newport, we're the #1 offender in the metropolitan area for I&I. And we've looked and begged, borrowed, and stealed any funding we can get for I&I. We have a unique system. We're a very small town, 4,200 folks, but we're a very diverse community in Washington County. And the design of the system, unfortunately, has led to, major issues, and we are the highest offender. With that said, we've applied and been very lucky with the Met Council, very successful. We got about $100,000 this year in private I&I funding, and we're going to go, I think there's another opportunity later this month, and we're planning on going for that to help pay for some of this project. And then we also got $300,000 this year for additional. There was another round of funding. So thank you so much to the Met Council. You've been a great partner for Newport. We're a community. Our entire budget, operating budget for 2024 is about $3.5 million. So to get this type of funding from the state and to get an agreement with the Met Council, it really allows us to do an $8.6 million infrastructure project, which I believe is the largest infrastructure project in the history of Newport. So this money will really, really help. This is just our priority 1. We do have a priority 2 and 3 I&I project, and we'll be continuing to seek funding federally at the state level and then also with the Met Council. So thank you so much, and willing to stand for any questions.
It sounds like you're in a bit of a unique situation, and first that you have flooding impacts being right next to the Mississippi, but then you also have the bedrock, so it's kind of a bathtub where you have pipes running through that, and anytime you get a little crack or what have you, then all of a sudden we're cleaning clean water, cleaning clean water already, and that's not good for anybody. Yeah, council member.
I just had a question. I mean, is your I&I like 10%, 20%, 30%, given these extreme events? Or if you have one extreme event and all of a sudden it's 50%, then that's, I just was curious as to.
I don't want to misstate the number, but we've had events that have been, you have your acceptable level, and we're so much higher basically at any rain event. And of course, we are susceptible, of course, to flooding. And anytime it floods, it goes all the way up, and this does come in. So we're looking at trying to do stormwater and then also these other improvements, because of course, if that clean water is being treated by the Met Council, that also means some of this dirty water is getting into the river. So it's kind of a double-edged environmental issue here in Newport, and it's just been, it's one of those things, frankly, without your help, this town wouldn't be able to do this work, so.
Great. Is there a motion?
Move approval.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And that takes us to our information item for today, which is an EPA report, 2024 EPA report summary for environmental services. Welcome, Ms. Solberg and Mr. Payne. Welcome back.
Thank you. Good evening, Chair. Council and committee members, Ashanti Payne, Assistant Director in the Office of Equity and Equal Opportunity, and I am joined by our Small Business Program Manager, Megan Solberg. I'll also mention that prior to becoming the manager of the Small Business Unit, Megan was also the program expert assigned to environmental services for that. So she is key and critical to establishing relationships and maintaining those relationships within that division. Also want to recognize her and her team in terms of putting together this report that is required by federal regulation for us to receive grant funds from the Environmental Protection Agency through the Public Facilities Authority to conduct projects within environmental services. She does a tremendous job in putting together this information. It's very technical and very manual, and we're always timely. Information is always accurate, and Megan and her team do an excellent job. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Megan to present the results from federal fiscal year 2024.
Thank you, Ashanti. Mr. Chair, committee members, for the 2024 report, as mentioned, we submit this to the public, or the PFA, the Public Facilities Authority. They then submit it to EPA on our behalf. We have a triennial 3-year goal. This is our first year at 11.9%. That runs from 2024 through 2026 federal fiscal year. Our previous goal was 11%. And what we look at are payments that were made to DBE firms within that report period across any project that we set DBE goals on. So again, project-specific goals, and then we submit that report on the utilization and payments. So for federal fiscal year 2024, our achievement was 12.17%, with a breakdown of 3.05% going to minority-owned businesses and 9.12% going to women-owned businesses. And below it'll show you our total disbursements. So we paid out just over $4 million to the DBE firms, and our reimbursements from PFA on those loans were roughly $33.5 million. You'll see in future slides, this is pretty low in comparison as far as what we've dispersed, but that $4 million is pretty similar to what we dispersed to DBEs last year. Below that, I think you each have it individually, but below that is going to be a breakdown. They require us to break it down by how much money was spent on the actual construction for those projects, the supplies, and then services, which services would be things like engineering, architectural design, things along those lines. So you can see there the breakdown. One thing I do want to highlight is going to be those services number. If you were to look at our MCUB or DBE directory, if you were to look at the directory, the makeup is generally 66% white women-owned businesses, and then 33 a third minority-owned businesses. And you'll see on future slides, we've always seen roughly double the amount of money paid to white women-owned businesses in those services, where this year we're almost to parity. We had $736,000 going to minority-owned firms and $744,000 going to women. But when you think that it's really a 2/3 to 1/3 ratio, I think that's a really good success to highlight. We have been pretty intentional with ES as partners to have a lot of meet and greet sessions where we did emphasize minority-owned firms coming in that we weren't historically seeing on these council projects for this. So I think the first one we held was right at the tail end of 2021. So I think now we're seeing some of those payments coming in, and we do have a lot more contracts that were recently awarded through our master contracting, where we're seeing a lot of those minority-owned firms that are coming in that weren't previously being shown on our reporting periods. So this is going to break down how that money was distributed for federal fiscal year 2024. It'll first be showing whether or not it was a woman or minority. For purposes of this table, minority just is going to be a male. So like the black women-owned firms, and then the black minority would be the black male-owned firms. It shows the total dollars that went to them. And then the number of women firms, that's going to be one unique woman firm. Total of subcontracts was across 3. It's a very small amount. But again, what this firm does is before and after photography, and I think they had a couple final pictures to come out on some projects that closed out. And then you can see the breakdowns there for the rest of the different groups. And this is just going to be some historical data. That first table is going to be the one that was shown previously, but then you can see below that where we were talking about those disbursements. This year, we only had 33.5 million roughly dispersed from PFA. Last year, we almost had 50 million. So we did have a lot less disbursements going on. Our achievement was 9.42. But one thing I think is good to kind of point out is the money that went to DBEs last year was 4.6 million. So when you look at how much money the DBEs, it's not that far off considering it was almost $16 million less that we got from PFA. But you can really see too, if you look at those services, that's where you'll see, last year it was 617,000 to women-owned firms, 329 to minority-owned firms. And then just a few more years, again, 923,000 to WBE, 574, and then again, almost half. So I do think that is really showing some of those efforts that have been taken to really focus on our minority-owned businesses that weren't really being represented, and we will see that continue moving forward, I'm hopeful. This is just going to be our yearly achievements since 2018. One thing that stands out to me is you can kind of see it's kind of an ebb and flow, and a lot of that has to do because it is based on payments versus commitments. So as projects begin and as projects ramp up towards the end, there's not a lot of DBEs in those spaces, right? That's the people coming in to do that. They're closing out. Where we really see is in the middle of those projects. Once everybody's on the projects, that's where we're seeing a lot of the construction work coming in, things along those lines, or some of the engineering on the beginning front side. So this just happens to be how it shows. So this was a little bit of an up year compared to the last year. So some highlights, we already talked about some of the highlights on here a little bit, but in 2024, we had payments were made on 127 individual subcontracts. MBEs accounted for roughly 40% of those subcontracts. In 2023, they were at 33%, and at 2022, 35%. So we did see a slight increase there. For professional technical services, again, this is going to be discussing that parity, which I am hopeful that we will continue to see, and based on some of the contracts we've seen come through and have provided and have been awarded, but we just haven't started that work yet. We do have a substantial amount of minority-owned firms that are getting a good amount of contracts and high dollar value contracts that will be coming up on future reports as those payments are issued. Another thing to point out is for our Hispanic-owned firms. Prime payments to Hispanic businesses made up 25% of the total payments to all DBEs, and Hispanic businesses make up about 9% of the directory. So their payments were at a higher level than what their directory makeup is. Their payments were roughly 500,000. And then again, looking at that 9% of the directory is Hispanic-owned businesses, 12.3% of the subcontracts went to Hispanic-owned businesses. So some of the paths to continued success, we really want to continue building up our Mentor Protege program. That is a program that we participate along with our other MNUCP partners, which MNUCP is our Minnesota Unified Certification Program. And what we do here is we really work to pair small businesses with larger prime contractors or first-tier subs so that they can grow their capacity, maybe expand into a new scope of work. Maybe they want to learn about how can I prime, what goes into being a prime on a council project, the paperwork, things along those lines. And our EDU engagement and development unit really work to kind of, it's almost a matchmaking. What can you bring to the table? What can I teach you? Do we think this will be a good beneficial working relationship for both groups? Some say yes, some say no, and then we find somebody else. But these are three that we have currently on the books right now. We have Public Solutions, that is a Caucasian women-owned business. We have PEWS, which is Pete's Water and Sewer, a Native American-owned male business, and Top Vision, which is a Black American male-owned business. So we're hopeful to see these firms coming through on more of our contracts as those work. You may recall, if you've been on this committee in the past, we had a mentor protege with US Afrique, which is a Black male-owned firm. Prior to doing the mentor protege program, he had not done a single contract or subcontract with the Met Council. And after and during that process, working with that prime contractor and building those relationships, he ended up getting over $1 million of subcontracting with the council. So it is something that really can help these firms get their foot in the door, because it is so much about those relationships that they build with that contracting community and that mutual trust that they have in each other, because it is a risk taking on some new firms sometimes, and sometimes the primes steer away from that. So when we can put newer firms into these types of scenarios, it's going to be beneficial for them as well as our outcomes at the council. I did talk about that meet and greet. We had the one in December, and then we just had one in Q2 this year. This one was able to be in person. The end of 2021 was still a virtual session, and that was also for our environmental services contracts on the professional services side. We want to continue doing that outreach to minority-owned firms and female minority-owned firms. Really, we want to continue the growth of the certified firms in general. We have started doing some partnering. Our Education Development Unit has been reaching out to chambers. The manager of the Engagement and Development Unit and I have been meeting with our our tribal liaison here to kind of try to get into those various communities and be able to find firms that are underrepresented, maybe qualify for certification, but just don't know about certification. We've talked about hosting some certification workshops at the various chambers and things where we can just go, we can be there to help them apply right as they're applying and answer questions. So those are things that we're looking to do moving forward. I just recently presented at a new DBE orientation event. We put that on with our MNUCP partners, and it's an all-day event, and we talk about the agency's contracting opportunities, how can they communicate and get in touch with us, how can they learn about and get emails for those opportunities. So that's a really good event that really yields some results for us as well. And then on here, we have some of our current supportive services being offered. We have hired a DBE firm, Project Solutions, to provide, this is a sample of some of the classes that they've been providing. So how to bid and estimate, how to respond to an RFP, things like managing change orders and contract processes, things that are difficult for sometimes small businesses that are a lot of times are often run one, maybe two people if they're lucky in their business. So they're trying to do it all. So we're really trying to streamline some of those classes and give them that opportunity to learn those, but then also have that one-on-one business consulting. And that is it, unless I can take questions if you have some.
Great presentation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Questions, please?
Has the council ever looked at changing the pay schedule for DBE and MBE contractors? Because that is one of the largest hurdles that they have to overcome is finances and having the financial backing. A lot of these firms, contractors can't go 3-6 months until they get paid. And even when they actually manage to land a bid, even here through the Met Council, they might land the bid, but then it gets pushed back 3 months, then it gets pushed back 6 months. And that has a huge impact with the financial costs and how they're planning their year to be able to do those projects or whatever it is, and it greatly affects them. I just want to see if the council has looked into changing the payment terms to help them get paid quicker, so that way they can continue to succeed.
Me too.
Sir. Thank you. Mr. Chair, committee member. We don't have any official policies or looked at changing official policies. What we have done on specific, especially large projects, is requested either immediate payment of retainage and things of that nature to help MCUB and DBE businesses get paid sooner. But to your point, that continues to be the number one barrier faced by small businesses in terms of participating on government contracts is that pay cycle. So that is at the top of our conversations when we're talking about barriers and ways to improve. We're looking at all aspects, first starting with our own processes, also the primes that we're paying directly, and also how can we make sure that the DBs and MCUBs are not coming into this blind, that we are providing some sort of support and training. One of the things we try to stress is the importance of mobilization and putting that and how that plays into your bid and can help along the way. But it is a continued issue, and we're continuing to find and try and find solutions to help small businesses navigate that barrier.
Is this on the radar screen for the management committee? Are you on the management committee? You're on the management committee.
For-
It seems like it should be.
Seems like procurement. I mean, no, but it's just,
If it's the number
Staff.
one issue, number one barrier, it seems like it ought to be a pretty high priority for us to try to figure that one out. It sounds like it is.
Yes.
Like you're working
Yes.
on it. but
Yes,
yeah.
I think also one thing I failed to mention as well is that we are working on updating contract language, first starting with FTA-funded projects, just because that regulatory compliance change has happened in terms of prompt payment and our monitoring of that and of prompt payment. And then also our technology. Our technology has to improve to be able to be responsive, be transparent, and monitor and track those payments as well. So we do have a three-phase approach, like I said, starting with FTA projects that have already been awarded, new projects, and then going, starting in 2025 with our other locally funded projects and EPA-funded projects.
Great. Any follow-up? Yeah, please.
Because I think it'd be a pretty simple change. There's already language that exists out there with some of the associations that can be easily given to a prime contractor and just make it, this is part of the bid spec, this is something you're going to have in your contracts with DBE and MBE contractors to adjust the pay schedule to make it more feasible for them to do these projects. So I don't know what we need to do, but it is as simple as including it in the contract language when the prime contractor is getting it. And if we let those prime contractors know before you bid, this is language that will be attached to our contracts. So it needs to be attached to your contracts with whoever you contract out. Should be a pretty simple ask.
Mr. Chair, council member, I don't disagree with you. And in some ways, the language already exists. And I think that's partly the emphasis behind some of the changes that are being mandated at the federal level is what they found is that organizations like the council are waiting for the small business to tell us there's a problem. And that's not good enough. So I think, yes, with the language, we have to be able to monitor it to ensure that it's happening as well. And I think that's where the gap has been, is in our monitoring and enforcing of some of that language that even already exists.
And you mentioned, council members, some associations that may have some suggested language on this. Is there any that come to mind?
Yeah, the Association of General Contractors already has language that's specifically for DBE and MBE contractors. I mean, and it's just putting it in the contracts portion of it. I understand the monitoring portion of it. And if the only way around where we don't have the active monitoring for it would be just to exclude those DBE and MBE contracts and let those be managed by the council, so that way we can make sure those payments get sent out in a timely fashion. So that way you don't have to double check what the prime contractor's doing. If we hold the contract directly with those MBE and DBE firms or contractors, you're already monitoring it because you are sending the payments to them instead of the prime contractor. So that is another way to work around it.
Mr. Chair, council member, I think we have to consider all available options and solutions. I don't want to keep saying the same thing, but yes, this is the number one issue, so we have to be able to consider all avenues. I also, you know, we as the council, procurement, OEEO, and specific business units, including ES, meet with the AGC. And one of the things that they've told us is they're seeking some legislative solutions to allow for contractors. They understand that not all will be able to opt into this, depending on your situation, but to be able to allow them to pay DBEs and MCUBs directly, even before they're getting paid from the council. Again, not every prime contractor is going to be in a position to do that, but at least to be able to give that availability. I haven't seen the language, but it has come up in our conversations. So hopefully that is something that is supported and can get moving through the legislature.
Great point. Thank you for raising that. Other questions, comments? Please, yeah, go ahead.
So are there any MBEs, DBEs that are prime on any contracts in ES?
In ES on our, Councilman, sorry, this is my first time presenting, so I'm a little nervous.
You're doing great.
Thank you, Committee Member Chair. We do on our construction side, typically not because of the nature of the work. On our engineering master contracts, we do see where we're selecting multiple vendors. We do have some firms that are priming those as that DBE firm.
Great.
I was pleased to see the services number go up pretty considerably, and you think it's really because of those get-togethers on a regular basis. I'm curious, what's covered in, is it like, what's upcoming projects that you might want to consider, as well as how to respond and get certified and all that type of thing?
Sure,
Yeah.
Mr. Chair, committee members. So what we do at those is we bring in from the environmental services, project managers, and representation. They'll talk about, here are some upcoming projects that are coming up. These are going to be firms that are already certified into either our DBE or MCUP program, and we talk about ways that they can do that. But we also, the biggest thing, I can't stress it enough, the biggest thing is really building those relationships between the prime contractors and the prime proposers that are bidding our work and those small businesses. And even just getting those small businesses in front of these vendors. Even folks I know from ES even commented, I didn't even know this firm existed out here when we had these firms come. And it really is that, because we do see there are good amounts of DBE, MCO firms that we see on all the contracts because the primes love working with them, they know them, they trust their work. How can we kind of break in new firms to this? And what we did on that one in 2021 was a larger one. We had Zan Associates, which is a DBE-owned firm, really facilitated breakout rooms. So we were putting small groups in with each of the big contractors. They could present themselves, talk about what their business did, what kind of services they offered. We collected capability statements from the firms that had those, and we sent those out to all of the contractors and prime proposers after that meet and greet. So really fostering those kinds of relationships and just making them aware and really being intentional and holding it mostly for, we invited it, but it was really geared for minority-owned firms and firms that are underrepresented in our reporting typically. So I really do think a lot of that has to do with it. I do think some of these mentor-protege agreements where we're able to really look at, okay, we're not seeing representation from Black-owned firms. How can we pair Black-owned firms with larger firms that can help them build their capacity, kind of show them the ins and outs of working with the Metropolitan Council, because those relationships are just so important. And hopefully moving forward, as they continue to grow that, we'll see more and more work coming through for them.
Absolutely. Other questions? Fantastic report. Really appreciate it.
Appreciate it, Sean.
Thank you.
All right, that takes us to Lisa for the day.
Sure, thank you. In the spirit of the meeting was very kind of a light agenda, I'm going to keep this very light and would like to just extend the invitation. Tomorrow we will be holding our Veterans Day flag raising ceremony at the Metro plant. I'm sure everybody likes to get up at 7:15 and go visit a wastewater treatment plant. But that is when we will be holding our Veterans Day flag raising ceremony. And Assistant General Manager Sam Paskey will be providing us with words during that ceremony. So please come down if you can. There'll be snacks, coffee, and company.
All good things. 7:15 tomorrow morning. Fantastic, bright and early. Excellent. Anything from the committee? We are adjourned. Thanks, everybody.